Namaskar and welcome to today's session. We're going to be beginning this conversation. Let's begin with the opening prayer as usual. The opening prayer is Sahana Vavatu. It's on your screen now. Please sit comfortably, sitting in any comfortable posture with the back straight, the back, neck, and head in a straight line. The back is straight but not stiff. The back, neck, and head are in a straight line. Close your eyes gently and relax the expression on the face. Relax your shoulders. Relax your belly. As you breathe into the belly and let the belly expand. As you exhale, just let go. Breathing into the belly, let the belly expand. As you breathe out, simply let go. Bring your palms together at your heart center and Namaskar Mudra, pressing the palms together gently, touching the fingers together gently, and gently touching the back of the thumbs into the chest. Now hold it right here. Bring your attention to the hollow space between the palms, inviting all divinity into your heart. Pay attention to the sensations, the vibrations, everything that's going on here at the heart center. We're going to chant Om 3 times and then the opening prayer Sahana Bhavatu. Exhale completely. Take a deep breath. Inhale. 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 Inhale and chant. Sahana Bhavatu. Sahanau Bhunaktu. Saha Viryam Karvavahai. Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Take your arms behind your back. Grab your right wrist with your left hand and breathing in, stretch. Breathing out, bend forward in a deep sense of surrender. Come back up, breathing in. Release your hands, rub your palms together to generate some heat. And then gently cup your eyeballs to transfer that heat, massaging the face and the neck. Now, while the eyes are still shielded, blink your eyes open and then pull your palms back like an open book. Namaskar. Namaskar and welcome. Ratnaji, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Gauravji. Namaste, everyone. My name is Pradnya Datte, and I am a faculty associate for session 16. Today's session is about stress, job satisfaction, and burnout. And today we have wonderful combination of 3 resident faculties members, Dr. Punit Mahendru, Kailash ji, and Gauravji. I'll briefly introduce you about these resident faculties. Punit, she's a practicing psychologist and she works with the adults experiencing mental health concerns. Next one is Kailash ji. Kailash ji is a retired IBM division general manager and he has almost 5 decades of experience in understanding and teaching management sciences. And Gauravji, he is an interfaith Hindu leader, a dhyana meditation and yoga teacher. Very recently, Gauravji has authored a book called Global Business in the Age of Destruction and Distraction. It has been published by Oxford University Press. So it is all about the today's resident faculty members, and we are all now eager to learn from these members more about the complex topic of uh, about stress. So over to you, Gauravji. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pratnyatji, and welcome, Punitji and Kailashji, to today's conversation. Pratnyatji, just checking, I was told my volume is low. Is that still the case, or has there been any improvement?
Uh, Looks okay to me. Yeah,
So far, so good. All right,
yeah.
fantastic. Thank you very much. Namaskar and welcome to today's session. This is going to be a very fun and interesting conversation because it's very topical. Our subject at hand is stress, job satisfaction, and burnout. And because this is a prevalent and all too common subject, we wanted to take a very interesting three-party view on this. So we requested Punit ji to come in as someone who's researcher and practitioner of psychology. I've requested Kailash ji to come in because of his keen understanding of management science and his work over the decades on job satisfaction. And I come in as a professional who's also a yogi. And having recently written a book on this subject, I have some thoughts that I'd like to share in terms of the nature of the workplace and why things are the way they are. With that being said, there are a few learning objectives that we have for this class. The first objective is that we would like you to understand stress and its causes. What is exactly stress and its causes? Relate to the with the experiences of stress. That's important, and that's what we're going to cover. One second. That's what we're going to cover next, which is what is the experience of stress? How does it feel? What do we mean when we are saying we're experiencing stress? Then identify the causes of stress. We also get to talk about job satisfaction and understand the drivers of job satisfaction or dissatisfaction, as the case might be. And then we talk about burnout. Burnout. What does it feel like? What does it mean? Where does the term come from? And what are the causes of burnout? Finally, we come to the most interesting part of today's conversation, which is understanding the solutions or management of stress, job satisfaction, and burnout. So that's what we're going to cover in today's conversation. It'll be highly interactive, and we're going to get right into it. The homework question for you as you're thinking about today's class is this. Think about a time that you have experienced stress or burnout at work. How now reflect on how you might respond to these external circumstances, the same external circumstances that you experienced, but differently based on your insights from the session. So try to read between the lines, look at what we're saying, but also try to understand what we're saying and what it means, and internalize it. And we'd like to hear from you how you've internalized these and how might you change the way you respond to those stimuli. So that's the homework question that we will get into. Now, let's talk a little bit about stress and burnout and what do they feel like. And this is to just bring us awareness of these things that we might have experienced but may not have known there's a name for it. So, what is stress and burnout and how do they feel? uh, Stress on the body, we feel the stress in the body all over the place. But stress isn't just a bodily thing. We experience it in our mind. We might experience brain fog or a feeling of overwhelmed or difficulty making decisions, even a lack of enjoyment from normal activities, irritability. These are all stress on the mind, and the body also responds. You may lose sleep, you may experience high blood sugar or high blood pressure, low sex drive, pain all over the body for undescribable reasons. The breathing is short. You might experience heartburn, headaches. All of these are ways to feel the experience of stress. And I'll request Punitji to talk about it in just a minute. Let's talk about burnout. Now, what does burnout feel like? Burnout is not quite the same thing as stress, as we will talk about in today's session. And here we have the image of a very popular movie actor. He played Spider-Man, by the way, one of the few that played Spider-Man, and then he took on a lot of movie projects. He took so many movie projects that he decided that he wasn't enjoying it anymore. And then, you can see his experience. His clothes are all disheveled. Of course, this is an artist's impression, but he doesn't seem interested in anything. He seems sleepless, tired, out of energy. And as the Punjabi joke goes, your Punjabi, there's a song in Punjabi that says, Punjabiyan di battery charge rehndi hai, which means that the batteries of Punjabi people are always charged. Well, Andrew Garfield is no Punjabi because his batteries are now completely discharged. That's the sort of experience of burnout that you may have experienced, or you may have seen people that have been through that sort of experience in their life. So that's what we're dealing with here. Now, with that, um, I'd like to request Punitji. In 1 minute, actually, I just realized I had one more fun slide to talk to you about, and this is just a brag from on behalf of me and Kailash ji, and it'll come a couple of times because he and I are both, scientists, engineer types in our education. So here's our brag. Our brag is simply that all the terms, a lot of the medical terms you're about to hear from Punit ji, are actually terms that have been borrowed. You're welcome, from the world of science, material science, and physics. And so it turns out this is the case also with the term stress. It's come into popular consciousness. We all know these words: tension, stress, strain, and stress. But would you be surprised that these are actually not terms native to biology or at all? They're actually from your first semester mechanical engineering class, where they put heavy weights and heavier weights on metal wires, and they watch the wire extend, 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 and at some point, the wire just gives up. The metal gives up and begins to flow, and then obviously break. And that experience, that is the science behind tension, stress, and strain, and stress. And when they observed that in human beings, they said, wait a minute, this is a familiar experience from good old material science, so let's use the same terminology. And so it's a term that's been borrowed from physics, and now we think of them not necessarily as physics terms, but as physical experiences. So with that, interesting aside, Punitji, welcome to today's class. And I wanted to ask you, I wanted to ask you, what is the experience of stress? And so for that, Punitji, I'm going to ask you to talk about that next. Punitji, we are not able to hear you.
Thank you, Gaurav ji, and namaste, everyone. So, let's talk a little bit about stress. And as Pradnya ji mentioned, it's something that I have seen a lot of in my practice. I think a lot of people come and talk about their experience of stress. And the interesting thing is that in the slide that Gaurav ji had shown you a little while back, and as you go through this, you can probably see it, that you will see that there are arrows going to just about every bodily organ, right? So to the heart, to the intestines, to the brain. I mean, literally every part of the body, circulation, is getting affected by stress, has the potential of being affected by the stress. And then that's on the physiological side. Then on the mind, a large number of symptoms. Some of them are mentioned here, but there can be many others that are also a consequence of stress. So now it doesn't mean that everyone will have every symptom. People have their own way of responding to stress. Some people, they might respond with developing, say, irritable bowel syndrome. Another person may respond with becoming very overwhelmed and anxious. Another person might feel that they just cannot think clearly or make clear decisions. So every individual has their own propensity to respond in a certain way. Physiologically, there is this idea of a vulnerability, a physiological vulnerability, that whatever bodily organ is predisposed either genetically or because of a past illness, that's where you will experience the stress more, right? So not to think that you're going to get all those symptoms. It just might be one or two or a couple. And having said that, sometimes stress manifests in symptoms which are really very different from what we've mentioned here. In fact, what used to happen usually in my clinical work is when doctors were not able to treat someone's symptoms in a evidence-based manner, whether it was someone had difficulty swallowing or someone had diabetes that really ought to have been managed with the medication but was just not being managed. So when they were not able to treat them with the evidence-based methodologies, then I got to see them to work with them along their stress. So essentially, everyone deals with stress differently. A lot of the symptoms have been mentioned, but it can be anything else. For instance, we didn't talk about one common symptom that people experience is hair fall. So you can, I think, so Gaurav ji, the secret is that's why he quit corporate work. So hair fall is also related to that. So and then sometimes people acne and rashes, skin rashes. So really, just name any symptom you can kind of correlate it to stress. Having said that, the opposite also exists. Sometimes people come and say that they are stressed, and then you start looking into whether they're truly stressed, and you find that no, not quite, that perhaps there is something else going on, that there is some other experience of either depression or some kind of an anxiety disorder, or for that matter, any other kind of a mental health concern that has, more clear biological or psychological basis. But it is much easier for people to say that they are stressed rather than for them to say, I have such and such, mental health concern. So both those possibilities exist, and we want to be mindful to note that it is indeed stress, and the symptoms that we are experiencing may have a relationship. Now, looking into how it gets defined. So the World Health Organization has defined it as a natural response to challenges and threats. So I want to emphasize the word here, natural. Stress has been borrowed from physics, it's true. And likewise, any amount of weight or pull on a wire is stress. But we think about it being under stress when it actually sort of breaks apart. So it's the same way with us. I mean, we experience stress on a constant manner every day in our life. However, when we say we are stressed, what we mean is that we are experiencing an overwhelming amount of stress that we are finding difficulty coping with. So otherwise, it's really a natural response. There's nothing pathological or unusual about it. Not only do we experience it, we must experience it if we have a productive life. So the other, now we looked at the physiological and the psychological symptoms, and I already talked to you about that. The other dimension of stress that I want to talk about a little bit is, looking at it as two dimensions. One is the type of stress as acute and chronic, and then in between you can have a third category of episodic, but along the axis of acute and chronic. And the other axis is that of internal and external. So I want to talk a little bit about this. So, an acute stress can be like accident or a certain trauma, or, someone comes and attacks you, or it can even be positive, childbirth, getting married. These are all positive factors, but they're also a stressor, right? So that's an acute stress. Then, of course, episodic would be, project deadlines, exams, health checkups. Someone comes to your house as a guest and doesn't leave for a while. So all these can be stressors. Then there is, of course, a chronic stress, which it seems to continue, extend. You could think in terms of something that's extending for several months, perhaps a period of 6 months, right? Financial difficulty, poor health, family problems, relationship issues, which are a very common factor of chronic stress. So there is that dimension. Then there is the other dimension of stresses that are internal and external. So a lot of acute stresses you will find are external, right? I mean, they can be internal if someone has some kind of a emotional breakdown or something, but by and large, we think in terms of acute stressors as external. There's an accident or something happens outside of our body, outside of us. Then there can be internal, which means, so the internal ones, I take that back. The internal stressors will very likely be more chronic. The way we look at things, our attitudes, our own vulnerability, our own resilience, perhaps the way we've been brought up, perhaps the experience that we've had dealing with those kind of stressors. Sometimes when people have had a very, very smooth, trouble-free childhood, they might not have learned how to cope with stress when they go to college. So there can be that as well, mediated by other factors. Sometimes what happens is that the stress starts as an acute stress, but then depending upon our ability to cope, as well as the internal dialogue that we have with ourselves, it becomes chronic. So part of it came from the environment and attacked us, or rather, came upon us. But then part of it, we perpetuated it. We kind of extended it and experienced it as an ongoing stress. Some of our belief systems are often the reason why that happens. So that is something to be mindful of, because a lot of times people feel that they're really stressed, but in reality, the stressor is not as it hasn't really happened recently. It may be something that happened a long time back, and they're perpetuating it. And here we think about, it's important to keep that in mind, because suppose someone has had a trauma in childhood, or has had extreme, has had an accident or a near-death experience, or some other acute problem or abuse as a child, that their ability to cope with stress in adulthood can actually weaken. And so, one of the two can happen. Their resilience can actually grow, or they might find themselves far more vulnerable to the stressors later on in life. So, so sometimes you might say, okay, why is my child, or why is such and such person, a friend, family member, experiencing stress because of this? And there's nothing going on in their life, and the work that they're doing is fairly routine. But it may really be that routine work is also a bit much for them because of some past incident that happened. And yes, even a single huge traumatic incident can cause the vulnerability to cope with stress later on in life. So just keeping that in mind is also helpful. So I think now we go on to Gaurav ji so he can add his perspective to this.
Sure. Thank you. Punit ji. So, from a yogi's perspective, the language of stress is actually very analogous to the language in yoga itself. So, we talked about, we looked at how a lot of those, the diagram we looked at, a lot of those will look very similar to the chakra charts that you will find in the yoga gift shop. Um, the autonomic nervous system, which is, you already know of the fight or flight reflex, but also the other end of that is the rest and digest or tend and defend reflex, which are autonomic processes below the surface of our uh, consciousness. But those are the things that are regulating the body. Think of them as accelerators or brakes. And those are very familiar to the yogi, because those are the Ida and Pingala nadis. Ida being the moon or calming nadi, and the moon or calming nadi, or 1 second, I'm going to just swap out, or Pingala being the warm or heating nadi. So that's the situation. Now, when you're in a good stress, like Punitji was talking about, a good stress is where you have some sort of enough pull on both of them, but it's not necessarily, it's good. It's creating, the juices are flowing. Bad stress is when you just have only one type, in this case, the Pingala, which is overall exertion, focus on the outside, always running out, always pressing your foot on the accelerator, never braking as such. And that's a sort of the experience of stress, where thoughts will begin to race. Again, it's something that a yogi will talk a lot about. Thoughts racing is our primary sort of problem that we begin with. Yoga chitta vritti nirodha, right? So the racing of thoughts and the shallowness of the breath, these are all symptoms that a yogi will recognize and try to solve for, because those are the things that we work with, the autonomic nervous system. The process of asana, pranayam, and dhyan are often they're designed to center us and bring these into balance. Again, not bring them to zero, but to bring them into a good, healthy balance. That's the important part. And in the Gita, we talk a lot about the gunas, right? So rajas, tamas, and sattva. Rajas is outbound energy. It motivates us to move, quite literally, and tamas is torpor, lethargic, encouraging us to stop and lie down and take some rest. And sattva is clarity, the mode of illumination. And what you're seeing in stress is, I've highlighted those for you here, an overemphasis on outbound energy, over emphasis on acceleration and heating up the system, but no counterpart, no balance in this whole thing. And that is the reason it tends to impact the body, because over the long haul, if you're only accelerating your car, you can imagine what goes on. And then when we were preparing for this conversation, Punitji and I were talking, a lot of people, if, the kind of medicines you might be prescribed might be uppers or downers. Uppers are things that that raise your energy and encourage you to move out. Downers ask you to calm down and relax. Those are the types of medicines people might give. Or alcohol, for example, is a downer. And so what Punitji and I were discussing, and Punitji, maybe you can comment on that. A lot of people balance their over acceleration with over braking, right? Which is, they will, in the weekend, they will party hard with alcohol or whatever to see if that'll soothe their system down. But it doesn't quite bring anything into balance. You're going from one extreme state of, highly accelerating car to, completely braking and so on. So Punit, I was wondering if you've seen that. Is that often an experience that comes together with the experience of stress? Punit, you're on mute. Sorry.
Himanichi, would you mind muting yourself? Thank you.
I'll mute you, no problem. Okay, you're done. Punit,
yes, absolutely. In fact, that is a very common phenomena, and I don't think I have to refer to my clients necessarily. I think we observe that at home, everywhere. whenever someone has a lot of stress at work, or they are feeling exhausted, then they just, what the word that they use, they veg out, right? They'll just plunk themselves in front of the couch, and they'll binge on some Netflix movies, or Prime or Amazon, whatever. And or possibly, grab some wine, or these days even some marijuana, right? So that's I'm not even looking at hard drugs or anything, but these are the common ways of coping with heightened rajas state, because the system is so revved up that they need to bring it down, and so then they resort to things that they can come down with. And I was remiss in not having mentioned, but maybe this is also a fine space to add, that the Ida Pingala system that Gaurav ji mentioned is akin to a sympathetic and parasympathetic system, which are really the two systems that regulate our body, our energy level, our functioning, and the sympathetic nervous system revs us up to act, to perform, to safeguard ourselves, to run from the lion, right? And the typical response of the sympathetic nervous system, because we want to be safe, is flight or fight. Either you want to fight the lion, or run away from the lion, or possibly even freeze, right? Freeze, flight, fight. And then the parasympathetic nervous system is what allows us to calm down and sort of restore our our equanimity. But sometimes what happens is that if that keeps going quite frequently, and we'll talk about the frequency being an important component in just a bit. But when that starts happening a lot, then we can't come down well enough. Or if we've experienced such a severe stressor that long after the stressor is over, our sympathetic nervous system still keeps going, And so that's an example of something that was acute becoming chronic. And that chronic kind of a response that our body has is connected with a lot of health concerns, our whether it's our heart or our GI system, or anything for that matter. Acute stress, when the sympathetic system is up, most of us are able to manage. So that was the physiology of stress. And then the two, it would be important to mention that the two important hormones that are responsible, that sort of get involved in the sympathetic nervous system, are cortisol and adrenaline. And you may have heard about cortisol if you're taking any medication for hypertension or for heart issues. Your doctor may have discussed cortisol and its connection, or its connection to sleep with you. So those are the hormones that I should have mentioned as I spoke earlier, that are involved with the sympathetic nervous system, with the flight, fright, freeze response, and as we cope with stress. And when that extends for a long time, then we can encounter some difficulty with our health as it relates to our day-to-day health condition. Gaurav ji, what was the question that you asked me again? Whether I encountered, yes, now I remember, whether I encountered this absolutely all the time. As I said, I don't have to think of my clients. It happens in all the homes. I think it happens in my home and everyone's home. So what's happening, and I'm going to refer this back to Gaurav ji, is that we are dealing with this intense sympathetic, which is sort of similar to the intense rajasic kind of energy. by engaging in more of the tamasic, and so it's a very it's a very non-nurturing, non-nourishing way of dealing with our excited rajas, right, Gauravji? And there could be an alternative.
Looks like Gauravji, he's lost access. Yeah.
Okay.
Kailash, would you mind having a look at the presentation?
That's fine. I can go ahead. So,
Yes.
what happens is that very often we veg out. So these are all tamasic, watching TV without really attending to anything specific, or eating a lot, opening the refrigerator, standing there trying to see what is it that I can eat now, because eating also kind of has that tamasic de-stressing value. So all of that in a way is not nurturing and nourishing us. So we kind of get back into that wheel, high stress, and then use these tamasic activities, then rajas again, and then again these tamasic activities. And what we forget is that we need to nurture and nourish ourselves in order to break out of that vicious cycle of stress. And Gauravji's just joined us. So Gauravji, I was about to talk about how we can have a sattvic intervention to this rajas tamas cycle.
Sorry, my computer experienced a case of fight or flight, so tried to rejoin.
It's been busy since the morning. Yes.
Wait, just give me a sec. I'm just rejoining 1 second. All right, so I'm back in action. So you were asking me sattvic intervention to balance all the rajas and tamas. So the thing is, the state we want to be in is a state of balance, and that can happen by first calming down the nerves. By eating the right kind of food. Sattvic food is important because your diet influences your moods, and your moods are essentially these three states. So, changing your diet, eating a lot of junk food or a lot of alcohol is not going to be very helpful. Having a good balanced meal is a good way to start. Changing your life practices to include meditation into them, and we'll come to it when we come to the sort of the management part. Those are all important. There are other things that you can do that we'll cover later in today's talk, but bringing the system into balance, I think, is the important, urgent requirement over here.
I was just saying, Gauravji, that all the tamasic activities that we use to balance, but perhaps they are not very helpful in the long run.
Yes, that exactly is right. Okay, so now we've talked about stress, and hopefully you have a good understanding of what stress feels like, what's going on behind stress, and that stress is not all bad. It can be a force for good, but you have to learn to bring yourself into balance. We'll talk about management of stress later. Let's turn our attention to burnout. Now, burnout is a term again borrowed from physics and science. And this term, it's a sort of human emotional state, but it comes from the language of engineering as well, where the two people that simultaneously and coincidentally coined the term, Dr. Christina Maslach and Dr. Herbert Freudenberger, both ended up using the same term to describe the same underlying behavior in the 70s. They were using terms that had existed, but burnout is a term that you might use in mechanical engineering when your ball bearings burn out because there's no oil in them. So again, I'm happy to gloat on behalf of all my my mechanical engineering friends that this is a term that's been borrowed. Punitji, I wanted to now turn it back to you and ask you, what is burnout? And is burnout a disease? Is there something you can take a checklist of symptoms and say I have burnout, or is it something different? And what is the experience of burnout? How is that different from your garden variety stress?
So when stress, so we realized what stress was, and the acute and chronic and episodic. But when that stress is, connected to the work situation, the work that we are doing, and most of the research, especially Christina Maslach's research, has been when it's connected to the work that we do. So ongoing stress at workplace leads to you know some symptoms which fall under three categories. And one category is exhaustion. The people, the person who is experiencing a lot of fatigue and feeling drained and low energy, not being able to cope, maybe some headaches and tension and backache and GI gastrointestinal problems. And the other category of symptoms is feeling kind of removed from their work, alienated from, not enjoying the work anymore, not feeling like they are interested, a kind of developing a state of, as the word in Urdu is being bezar, right? Not really caring about their work. And there is some element of cynicism. And initially, when in the 70s, Freudenberger he talked about it in connection with people who were in the helping professions. And then Christina Maslach talked about it with regard to work per se. But there can be burnout, in both these categories. So that's cynicism, along with not being too interested in work, is kind of a common experience. And then the other is the one that I think employers may want to be more concerned about, and maybe we can, the more we talk about it and discuss it. And I know that several of our CHTs, might be in positions where they are in management. So kind of knowing that actually the performance, the efficiency, the efficacy of one's work, the quality, quantity, productivity really goes down with burnout as well. So these are the three different areas. So Christina Maslach, as I said, kind of talked about it from the point of view of work, and she came up with she was one of the first people to come up with a kind of a tool, a kind of a questionnaire, and she called it MBI, Maslach Burnout Inventory. And it has different symptoms. On the right side of the slide, you'll see different symptoms that she asked about and inquired about. And so the important thing to keep in mind there was, how frequently are these occurring? Like everyone experiences, say, exhaustion at some point when they're working, or maybe there's a period in their life when their productivity goes down. But how frequently is it occurring? Is it, a daily, weekly phenomena? How long has it been going on? And the symptoms that she talked about again, about fatigue, and difficulty with sleep, whether there was some kind of a forgetfulness, any whether a person had started becoming sick more often, right? Or if any other sadness, loss of appetite, anxiety, these symptoms were present. And with cynicism and detachment, she asked about, loss of enjoyment, whether they felt pessimistic about their work, whether they felt isolated or detached. So, and then they talked about feeling of apathy and hopelessness, and irritability and lower productivity. So when you look at it, you'll see that uh, a lot of these symptoms are common with stress, just regular stress, right? But here we're talking about the connection to work per se. So the word burnout is often connected with one's work. And so that's the relationship with the stress. It's equally important to see that a lot of these symptoms are symptoms of depression. Fatigue, insomnia, forgetfulness, impaired pretty much all of them are also found in someone who is experiencing clinical depression. Then detachment and low productivity is also found in a person who's experiencing depression. So here we have the need to identify, is it just regular stress? Is it burnout because it is in connection with work per se? And or is it depression? Now, stress, when it's ongoing and it's related to work, can lead to burnout. And burnout, when it is ongoing for a while and the person is not able to change it, can lead to a feeling of helplessness and lack of control. And along with these symptoms, can then lead to depression. So, all those are connected, that one's work and the difficulty and overload and lack of control at work can actually lead to clinical depression as well. So these are all interrelated, and as I think I mentioned earlier, is that sometimes people just say they're stressed out, and when you start talking to them, you might find that there is nothing unusual about their work situation necessarily, and perhaps they're experiencing depression, which is why they are saying that they are burnt out or they are stressed. Now, how do we differentiate whether it is depression or burnout or stress? The important thing is that when a person is experiencing work burnout, if they go away from that situation, they will be okay. If they go away to, for a month, they go travel somewhere else, that they will find that their functioning comes back. They actually start enjoying things. When it is clinical depression, it is less likely to be that way. I'm saying less likely because even depression can respond to a great vacation in Hawaii, So, but the thing is that it is less likely to improve than work-related burnout, right? So that's the connection there. And of course, in some ways, it's similar to stress. It's just related to work. I'm having a little bit of lost my train of thought. So
if it's forgetfulness, then we should talk about it.
Next time.
So we can go on to the next slide, which is, I think, some more details about Christina Matz. So people very often feel that if they have a lot of work, then they are going to experience burnout. So they talk in terms about, okay, why don't you take a day off, or why don't you take a vacation, and so on, because they are correlating burnout with workload. But Christina Maslik, when she did this research, she found that it wasn't necessarily the workload itself. I mean, that was an important factor, yes, but the other factors were equally important with burnout. There was this element of how much control the person had over what they do and how effectively they can do their work. So feeling that, I personally have often said to people that one of the most frustrating experience a person has that is when they have responsibility without having authority to make changes in a situation. So you're responsible to bring about a certain change, but you don't have the authority to uh, put in place those practices that will allow the change to happen. So somebody else is controlling the, it's the strings, but you are right there trying to make something work. So that lack of control can lead to burnout. Also, very often, this has been an experience of burnout has really come to the forefront lately, along with stress during COVID, because here we see one of the important things is that of community, right? That the relationships that you have at work with your colleagues, feeling supported by them. And during COVID, when people were working from home, initially it was good, for the first year people were happy that they didn't have to commute, but after that they started feeling that sense of isolation and alienation. They lost that community support that they depended upon. A lot of people lost friendships, and that alienation enhanced the experience of both stress and burnout. Then she talked also about reward, that people think that it's financial reward, but actually more than that, it's a feeling of being appreciated for the work you do, of getting a pat on your back, or your colleagues sort of recognizing what you have done, the contribution you have made, and just that experience of feedback, positive feedback from not just your managers, but also from your colleagues. And that was very important as well. Then the other element was that of fairness, feeling that you're not being, I think most, we've seen enough movies and heard enough stories when someone's passed over for promotion in an unfair manner, and how how that leads to feeling very disillusioned and cynical about your work. Also, then the values, whether the work is in sync with the person's values. Maybe the company that they are working for has their mission statement doesn't jive with one's own sense of values, or maybe their focus on their bottom line doesn't feel right for a certain individual, or maybe they are misaligned with regard to the work. And this happens very often when in our Southeast Asian context, when we've been asked to follow one or two train of professions, and our natural interest and natural value may be somewhere else, but there's such a discrepancy between those certain lines of works and the kind of work that the person may want to do. For instance, a lot of people may have gone into IT because they knew that it pays well, but actually they might want to do something totally different. Maybe they want to follow the arts, or maybe they want to teach. And that discrepancy in their own interest, as well as the value of the work that they're currently doing, can also lead to burnout. So these are some of the things that one can experience. And it became, that's why you saw that during COVID-19, that there was a lot of burnout, and there was a lot of turnover, and a lot of people sort of left their jobs and didn't go back to it, and changed their professions and chose professions that paid much less, but where they felt that they could sort of identify with the values of that profession. On the right here, we have, I think, the inventory, the burnout inventory. This says it's the Copenhagen
Yes.
burnout inventory. So
it's different from the Maslach inventory.
Yeah. But the important thing to note is that they do ask about the frequency here. That's, because just an occasional or a one time or two time or three time experience of these symptoms would not mean that it's burnout. Another thing I wanted to mention before I turn it over to Gaurav ji is that, a lot of people, because I was looking at the videos on burnout, and a lot of people, I even came across some TV clip saying that burnout is now a diagnosis, but it's not. This Christina Maslach's inventory is actually just for research purposes. Burnout is not a clinical diagnosis, so people have to remember that. So going to a doctor asking for a month off because they are burnout is not going to be very useful. I mean, okay, if the doctor's your friend, that's a different thing, but you cannot ask for medical leave necessarily for an extended. I mean, it's okay, everyone is entitled to a couple of days of mental health days or something, but you cannot ask for, say, 2 months off because you're experiencing burnout. The other thing that I wanted to mention before I hand over to Gaurav ji is that though Maslach has talked about burnout primarily in relationship to work, because most of her research has been at work, but burnout is also a phenomena that we can experience in some other areas. And we can experience a burnout, caregiver burnout. I mean, the second most common reason for burnout is going to be caregiver burnout. And then we can have burnout of a person who is, in a professional school, like medical students. We've heard about how there is a high incidence of suicide amongst medical students, and perhaps the burnout is leading to depression, and that may be connected to the suicide rate as well. Sometimes, and this happens more, I think, in when that sometimes parents, I mean, I have experienced this in my clinical practice, when a young parent does not have any support, so imagine a young couple and the husband is working long hours because he has to support the new family, and the mother has a small baby plus a toddler and is not sleeping at night. So then that ongoing stress also leads to burnout, which can lead to some amount of neglect of the children. So in other situations too, it can happen. It's just been studied and researched much more at work, right? So I'm going to hand it over now to Gauravji.
Thank you, Punitji. It was interesting in the research that a lot of the early research pointed not to professional work, which we will talk about next, but really caregiving and caregiver work, including volunteer work, which is Freudenberger's work, right? Similar to what HCI is doing, which is providing services in the community. It turns out that you can burn yourself out doing just that. And I thought that was a very stark thing. This wasn't these valueless, missionless enterprises, but actually very high value and high mission enterprises that people felt that they enjoyed the early part when they were giving care, but now that it's a bureaucratic machine, it's not something that they enjoy, and somehow the chasing of case after case, it burns people out. I thought this was a sort of crisis of caring, in the sense that your heart no longer flows with joy, and that's leading to this problem. That was my takeaway, also from a yogi's perspective, that these terms, every symptom that's listed here, from a yoga point of view, I could recognize, but I could recognize them in their original Sanskrit names rather, because we think about what we're talking about here. We're talking about no energy. What is no energy? This thing that animates us, this energy that animates us is prana. And a source of, basically, you're going to work, and your work, instead of providing you more energy, energizing you, it is depleting you, and day after day you're getting depleted, and a few days, months, weeks, years later, you're out of juice, and that's just no more prana. And that shows on the body, because body organs begin to atrophy, because again, low vitality, low energy. I thought that was pretty stark, that this is essentially an energy crisis, not of the fossil fuel variety, but of the sort of prana variety. And when we talk to Kailashji next, that's going to be my question. How is it that workplaces can be re-energized, and so on? The second thing I noticed, from a yogi's point of view, is that this lack of joy, this lack of taste, this lack of enjoyment, I thought that was hugely familiar, because we know the opposite of that. We know that rasa is taste. It's this joy that flows, this current that flows in everything that you enjoy, and you're no longer able to enjoy anything. And that is being described here in technical language. The third thing that I saw in the values part that Christina Maslach talked about, I thought that was amazing, because it pointed, Punitji, you were just saying that a few minutes ago. It pointed to your inner compass, which is your swadharma. You talked only indirectly about, in the Asian or Indian culture, you're either a doctor or an engineer. Maybe that's not your swadharma. That's not who you wanted to be when you grew up. But then, for sake of money, or because everybody else was doing it, you're doing it, but your internal compass is pointing somewhere else. This is very familiar to a yogi, because this is a classic Swadharma problem, where my internal makeup requires me to do other things, but I'm now acting differently. And so very low energy throughput is going through into my everyday work, because my heart sings some other songs, so to speak. And to sum up, from a yogi's point of view, I see this as a twofold problem. It's a spiritual energy problem, and it is a spiritual energy problem linked directly to this heart chakra, right here in the center, because that's what connects us to people. This is where the sense of community, that's what animates us, that's what gives us joy, that's what gives us energy. It pulsates through our entire being. And so I feel that it's a crisis of the heart chakra itself. From a yogi's point of view, I felt that's being described here. So now we want to turn our attention to, if we say stress, some stress is good, long-term stress is bad, and long-term stress in the context of work pressure, typically it leads to burnout. What's going on at the workplace? And that's the question, we turn to Kailashji to ask, because Kailashji, over his decades of mentoring people, or creating organizations, and in fact creating a whole framework on job satisfaction, Kailashji personally, to me, has been a mentor on this whole subject of job satisfaction. I wanted to turn to you, Kailashji, and ask you, what's going on in the world of job satisfaction? Why is work leading to burnout in so many cases? And is it a problem with work, or is it something that people have some sort of agency over? Kailash.
Thank you. So I'm going to just kind of give you a little bit of a personal reference to the subject matter. So when I started my career early on, I was at Cornell, a graduate student, then faculty, then IBM. I quickly saw and realized that there is a prevalence of dissatisfaction among all ranks and files of people at every level. In fact, higher the level, the satisfaction seems to be higher. Faculty and workers, IBM, professionals, and all that stuff. And I said, wait a minute, this is not right. But then I said, okay, where does the person go when he or she is experiencing a chronic condition of job satisfaction? Answer is nowhere. I said, wait a minute, you have a toothache, you immediately run over to the dentist. Your dog has got a problem, you take him to the veterinarian. And you have a job issue, which is a big part of your life, and there is no recourse for you. That is something. By the way, that is still today. This is also true today. Okay. So what seems to happen is that when job condition dissatisfaction becomes, and we come to the causes and things in a little bit. When dissatisfaction sets in, eventually it ends up you having to suffer and adjust and manipulate and make whatever you can do. Eventually, it affects you to a point where you have to either see a psychologist or endocrinologist, or you have to go to your blood pressure or your some kind of a manifestation which is chronic physiological lifetime problem. That's how serious the problem is. So I said, wait a minute, I think I need to study this and get into deeper into for my own self. So to make a long story short, I did that. I developed and I did a lot of reading and all that. So I'll show you my thinking on it, which is based on a lot of research also. But I benefited from it in my own career, my own joy. I've never hung on to a job more than 15 days if I was unhappy. I changed it or I changed myself. You have both those two choices. I don't think you can, by and large, change organizations. So you have to have the steering wheel in your own hand. That is the first thing about job satisfaction. If you don't see the steering wheel in your hand, you are headed for the MD kind of a stage, which is too late. Anyway, so let us go back to the first slide. And here we say, basically, job satisfaction is really an overall assessment of psychological, physiological, environmental, social factors that surround one's job. That is very complex phenomena. There's burnout, stress are also inclusive into that, as you can realize, psychological, physical conditions. This cartoon, I think, is interesting. I think it may understate marriage. It says that if you want happiness for an hour, you take a nap. If you want happiness for a day, you go to a picnic. If you want happiness for a week, you go on a vacation. If you want happiness for a month, get married. I think that guy probably did not have a very happy marriage, but that's what it says. If you want to have happiness for 1 year, inherit wealth. If you want happiness for lifetime, learn to love your job. Learn to love what you do. I think that is kind of an essential message is that. And you cannot just adopt to a bad job, but you have to make changes and make sure that you are satisfied with your job, with your occupation, with your vocation, with whatever you do. So that is the second. Go to the next chart. And basically, in management, from a management perspective, a stable job is basically a need-based system, dynamic system. It is in equilibrium, in a dynamic equilibrium, where the employer needs are balanced with the employee's needs. It is kind of a fulcrum. If one tips over a little bit more than it should, then there is a dissatisfaction, and you get the consequence of that. Either you have a employee who has been fired, or a employee who is unhappy, or an employer who is not very happy. All kind of a mismatch will happen in that process. The employer needs are very simple. Employer wants profits or meeting their objectives through whatever they expect from this employee. Employees share that contributes toward the profit or goals, and they want the employee to be happy. No employer ever wants an employee to be unhappy. So they do things for you. They do give you bonuses, recognition, awards, all kind of things to make sure that you are happy, but you are performing, that your output exceeds the input they're giving you fundamentally, so that they can be profitable and sustain you, the company, and your job. For the employee, the needs are very simple. Employee wants to be satisfied with the job, and he wants to also have a very happy employer. He doesn't want to hear bad things from the employer. He doesn't want to have a manager counsel him every day or her every day. Satisfaction is packed with a lot of goodies. I think Punit ji showed you a whole bunch of that model on. It's called management fit, job person fit. So fundamentally, that is a very good definition of a whole bunch of things that go in there. Compensation is a very small part of it in overall value. People, if you give somebody a salary increase in 2 paychecks, they forget about that. But the other conditions, the other surrounding conditions that we talked about, fairness, camaraderie, all that stuff we talk about, they are the ones that determine satisfaction. So now let's go to, let me just show you this quick video of this Gallup video.
Yeah, one second. I'm just resharing with audio. Sorry.
Is that the global workforce? This is the last year's.
The world experienced a pandemic in 2020. We did not all experience it the same way. Last year, Gallup asked workers in every region of the world about key issues affecting their lives. The insights from these questions developed our newest iteration of the State of the Global Workplace report. Here are some of our discoveries. Globally, employee engagement is dismally low. The majority of full-time workers in the world are either watching the clock or actively opposing their employer. This disengagement creates a drag on productivity, innovation, and organizational change. The workforce reported higher stress, worry, anger, and sadness than the previous year. Negative emotions increased more for women than men, and more for workers under 40 than those over 40. Given the hospitalizations as well as lockdowns, closed schools, increased remote work and unemployment, these numbers are not surprising. They represent the frustrations and struggles of millions of workers across the planet. As employers rethink and restart their workplaces, there is still hope for the future. Most urgently, leaders must take action on the importance of overall employee well-being and engagement for workforce resilience, from physical health to loneliness, financial hardship to community support. All these factors influence the enthusiasm and productivity of workers. Successful corporations of the future will not only generate profits, but will also generate thriving employees who are capable of weathering crises.
So basically, that's kind of gives you a graphic view of what goes on. You can relate to that. Any place you walk, you will see this kind of a scene, commonplace. It's actually universal all over the world. So I've been looking at this for the last 15 years. It's a good overall view of the world and what happens. And it's basically pretty stagnant. This picture has not changed much, even with the pandemic and after pandemic or before pandemic. It's been around 20% of the employees are engaged, completely engaged. These are the people who really make the company happen, make the profits happen. They're the leadership. They're the people who go home late, come early, and they're the ones who carry the weight, more than their weight. 20% on the other extreme are completely disengaged. They're also probably unproductive. They're the people by the water fountain who always badmouth their companies. These are the people who spread the perfume, like they call them, around, and so on. And the remaining 60% are disengaged at various levels. So it varies. It varies. They contribute. They produce. However, just in economic value alone, in the US, for example, this 20% disengaged level population costs the businesses over $500 billion. So that you can go from there and guesstimate the impact on other places also. So they are people who are not even producing a bit of what they get paid, for example. So that is sort of a overall picture of the problem. So dissatisfaction basically is goes more or less hand in glove with the same kind of statistics. So I think you can surmise that about 50% of the population perhaps would fall in some level of significant dissatisfaction and needing some kind of attention, some kind of a help. Now, what are the major contributing factors to job dissatisfaction? And I've grouped them here in 4 categories, and within each there are a whole bunch of subjects beyond each one. The biggest cause of the dissatisfaction, by the way, happens to be the person himself or herself. And that has to do with their own attitude, their own health condition, their own work-home balance, their own skill level, their own proactivity. Proactivity is the most important instrument that one needs if you are in a complex environment to be able to be counted, to be able to initiate an activity when you don't like something, to be able to sit down with your manager and say, by the way, I want to talk to you, as opposed to waiting for the manager to call you in. So that is the proactivity, which unfortunately is not taught in school. So you have to sort of be on your own. But the biggest factor would be that one, the individual himself or herself. Management, of course, and management basically does two things. It's not a major factor. It's their leadership they demonstrate to you and the motivation they provide to you. Other than that, they're going by the books. They have to pay you, they have to do your performance evaluation, they have to be fair, all that kind of stuff. The third factor here is environment, and it has to do with a whole bunch of things, your working condition, physical condition, the job itself, the challenge in the job, the communication that happened, the culture of the company. But to me, the biggest factor that stands out in the environment is your peer group. If you have a peer group that you get along with and they respect you, you're likely to be a satisfied person. That is probably the single most important indicator I tell people I mentor is how do your peers see you? How do you get along with your peers? Do you socialize with them after work? Do your families get together and interact? And if none of that is happening, most likely that is a source of your job satisfaction problem also. And the fourth factor, of course, obviously, is what I call the goodies. Goodies is what you get from a job. This basically fundamentally is the compensation, salary bonus, stock incentive, whatever they give you, recognition, as to when you do something, you get the kudos, you get your picture on the bulletin board, you get announced, you get promoted, all the things, opportunities, you're not stagnated in a corner cubicle and you're going to stay there open-ended. No, you can see clear ways to move to other opportunities, and you also have a career path other than, unless you are in a consulting job or a law practice or something where you don't care for a career path, but you do want to become a CEO. You want to know what is my pathway to becoming a CEO. You may not get that, but to have that possibility is a motivating factor for most human beings. So those are the four contributing reasons for job satisfaction, job dissatisfaction, whatever have you. So that's basically summation it's a need-based system, and basically you have the steering wheel of your job satisfaction by and large, unless there are some blatant things happening, by the way, and they do happen in minor situations like discrimination or some kind of a vendetta against you or some kind of a harassment. That does happen. But I would say 90% plus cases, I think the systems basically are by and large fair and they treat you fairly. So that is, I think, a good recognition to have. And these are the four primary reasons for dissatisfaction. And there are things you can do about each one of these. So now we can go to what I think are the remedies to consider. So basically, I have got 12 here listed. There's many more, by the way, but these are primary. The top ones are kind of more of a process. So the first thing, the remedy I recommend to people that I mentor is you have to, first of all, sit down with a quiet mind and internalize and diagnose. It doesn't happen in one day. It'll happen over some time. You diagnose the problem, and you have a very powerful tool in your hand. Yantra. You have a great yantra. It's called intellectual honesty. Intellectual honesty is one of the biggest gifts that we have if we can use it. And basically, it means that you look at the facts as facts and be critical and honest about looking at those facts. For example, if you think you have become obsolete in your job, in an intellectual honesty manner, you would say, I think that is the problem. Or your performance has gone subpar. Intellectually honest person would say, I think my performance stinks. I got to do something. Or some such assessment. If you make an intellectually honest assessment and then do a 3-item checklist. First one is, do I like my job or not? These are very simple dipsticks. The second one is, do I enjoy my peers or not? So you simply go, so job basically bundles your boss, your job assignment, or all kind of a salary, everything is coming in the first bullet. Second bullet is, do I enjoy my peers? Do they enjoy me? What is the situation there? And the third one is, does my family like my job? We say, well, that's kind of strange. Why should the family like the job? Well, if a family doesn't like the job, you got a problem. Every day when you go to work, you have people saying, hey, where are you going? That's not a good place to go. And that's a heck of a burden to be carrying in your lifetime. So if you can do a serious dipstick on these three, you should be able to judge your own assessment of your job satisfaction. If they are 50%, 60% or better, all the three of these, you're probably doing okay. It'll never be 100% on all of these. But those are the three indicators that are, to me, that really tell you a great story or make a great assessment, as long as you're being again honest to yourself in that way. Now, what are the remedial things you do? Again, many of them are very easy said than done, as we know. But I think the strong home life and having a transparency at home is very important. For example, you tell your spouse or partner or children about what is really happening at the job. How do you really like it? How do you get along with people? What kind of frustration do you see? You have a place where they can give you some suggestions. They can be sympathetic to your workload or up and down and so on. So home life is a very strong element of job satisfaction and need to be worked on just like you work on everything else. The second one is to remain proactive for making changes. And the next one is manage your manager. In fact, 4 and 5, you can combine those. So the biggest, if you want one big recipe in terms of management, it is that you should learn to manage your manager. And the way you manage your manager is you take initiative and you go to him or her and say, by the way, let me tell you what I want to do. I just want to see I get your feedback on this so I can move ahead. I think maybe we should do the following to improve the situation around here. You become an owner, you take ownership and on par with your manager, you become a partner with your manager. Don't wait for them to boss you and to give you deadlines and dates. You give them deadlines. Then you negotiate. They can negotiate with you. But I think this proactivity and managing your manager is a very big part of achieving. This also makes you, by the way, gets you ready for that manager's job. Once you know what this manager does through these interactions, then next time they look around, they say, who should take Charlie's job? Well, they'll say, this is obvious. You'll be the obvious person to pick into that position. So the next one is I call that the surgeon's attitude at work. And that says that when you're working, you really work, kind of no nonsense. It doesn't have to be 20 hours a day, but those few hours when you do something with sharp focus and get something really clear out that you're very proud of, that is what I call surgeon's attitude. Surgeon cannot lose attention and create a problem there. So that's what I call surgeon's attitude. I think the next one is, I call it stay away from gossip and whiners. This is another big source of dissatisfaction. When you go to these water fountain, I call them water fountains, or beer after work. The Japanese do this very much, by the way. They have this, I've been to those gatherings after work. They go to a bar and they drink, and they're always bad-mouthing the company and the boss. It's all about the company and the boss. So I said, and then they go home and they sleep, and next morning go and get on the train for a 2-hour ride back to work. I said, how can you ever be happy when you do that kind of a routine? But they do. The other one is, I talked about it before, number 8, build bridges with peers at work and outside. And by the way, on the peers, avoid the whiners. Be selective. Be selective about who your the peer group is that you are socializing with, that you associate with, that you are proud of, and that who are proud of you of being their peer. Okay. Number 9, that is, I think, if you can find someone as a mentor who's willing to work with you, help you, but you need to make sure that you also bring something to the mentor, and something you bring to the mentor perhaps is you are very innovative, you're good with information, you're good with humor, you're good socially. You have something that the mentor says, this young man is very good. I like him, and then they will give you some support and guidance in difficult times and critical times. So the mentorship is a very powerful element of bringing job satisfaction and, in fact, job prosperity, job growth, promotions, getting to the CEO position, the executive position, what have you. And the other one is number 10, is to build a career path inside or outside or both. Meaning that if you're working for company A, and company A, I say, I can have a career path here. Oh, but I can also have career path with the competing company B, and I want to work on both of these. I want to map both of these and see if there may be a time when I can jump out and build my second stage over there, because maybe they have a better prospect going forward. So career path is a very significant part of your managing your job satisfaction. And then eventually, if job satisfaction gets to a point where you are not able to tackle it, it has become, or you're out of juice, you're out of date on your skills and what have you, then don't hang around and frustrate yourself. Just quit and find another job or do something. But hanging around, that's when you go headed for the MD scenario, actually, again, creating a more physiological diseases and lifelong chronic problems. And by the way, number 12, ultimate thing you can do is to get your recipe of satisfaction. It's not that difficult. It's relatively easy if you can logically and honestly work on it. And by the way, try to become a coach for others when you're ready. And I think that is to me, the journey that many people can follow, and because they have the capacity if they resolve to do that. So that probably is, I think, my presentation.
Thank you, Kailashji. Thank you very much. Punitji, I turn it back to you. And now that we have some sense of how to handle or manage job satisfaction, let's turn our attention back to the idea of stress and how can we manage stress?
Yes, thank you, Gauravji. So you'll find that when it comes to managing stress and dealing with work satisfaction and also burnout, there's a lot of overlap. And right at the top of this slide, you see, meditation, exercise, diet, sleep. Of course, Gauravji, being a yogi, added the meditation piece. I earlier just had exercise, diet, and sleep. So, but absolutely, meditation is probably very powerful. And in fact, when you have that in place, other things naturally flow from it, right? But, lately, I've been listening to a lot of videos, and they say that, food is medicine, right? You've heard a lot of public TV videos on food being medicine and how you can actually change and reverse your chronic illnesses such as diabetes, etc., with your diet. And the same, of course, applies to stress. Unfortunately, we see the reverse happening. And it's just such a, I mean, I hear this from everyone, including young people, including, my own children, who will say, I can't really, I have no time to eat healthy. I'm so busy, I have no time to eat healthy. Not realizing that if they do manage the diet a little bit, then the feeling of being stressed at work would be managed better, because certain diets that are highly processed do reduce the ability to manage stress. Likewise, with the exercise, I think people who exercise regularly or do yoga regularly are usually, what I have noticed in a consistent manner, without any exception, that they are the people who have more energy and are able to undertake more in the day. And as I said, meditation, of course, when it gives you that focus and that ability to let go and not hold on to things, that everything else can sort of flow well from it. And the sleep. So interestingly enough, the what I have noticed amongst the young in my clinical work of 3 decades, that people think of sleep as, a lot of people think of sleep as redundant, or that they can do with less of, or that maybe they can make up on the weekend by sleeping in till noon or 2 p.m. I've come across people who are holding 2 jobs simultaneously. I've even come across people who are holding 2.5 jobs, concurrently. And, they come in with symptoms of being really stressed out, even complaining of clinical depression. And when I start talking to them and I learn about their routine, I'm just surprised to find that they, are barely getting by with 4 hours of sleep, and that to interrupted sleep, or their shift schedule is such that is constantly fluctuating, and they are unable to find a consistent sleep pattern. These things are, you will find that, name any illness whatsoever, I mean, whatever part of the body, mind, organ, these are consistent across the board, that you've got to get these squared away. There is no way for you to manage a heart condition or diabetes or hypertension or anxiety or stress or anything whatsoever without at least having adequate amount of exercise, diet, sleep, and of course meditation is, as they would say, soneme suhaga. So coming to time management and boundaries, I think Gauravji and I were discussing this idea of we tend to sort of while away so much time with doing small and urgent things. The phone rings and we have to get it, or something else that we feel we just have to take care of. So we have the tendency and the desire. It's a good intention. The intention is that once my desk is clear, the emails are taken care of, I've attended to the phone calls and a few other chores, that I'm going to actually sit down and do my real work. And what happens is, by the time they've done with everything else, there is no energy left to do the solid piece of work. So it may take a little bit of reframing to do that which is most valuable first, and then squeeze in the other small things. I think a lot of people may be familiar with that concept of putting the big rocks in first in the day. Then so another important way to kind of See, what happens is that people, these are things we forget to do. Socialization, once again, a lot of people who are very busy at work, I have no time to attend this function, or no, I cannot possibly do that. It's not fair. For we have a deadline next week, and it would not be right to take away this much time to maybe go for a family picnic. So there is this tendency to feel that unless and until that these things, whether it's a family picnic, or whether it's spending 2 hours playing ball with your child, or whether it is going out for a little get together somewhere, socialize with friends, that these are waste of time, and that which is real is just your work. And we forget that these interactions and these quote unquote things that we consider frivolous actually nurture and nourish us and allow us to cope with work better. They create a balance in our life. They allow us to deal with our stress better, and they actually prevent burnout from work because they're nourishing us. They're providing us with the prana. Then the relationships, once again, so this is very interesting. I mean, these sound like very there is this concept of called semantic satiation. Sorry if I mispronounced it, which means we hear certain things again and again and again so much that they lose value. So you've heard all these things so many times, you know it. I'm not saying anything new. And yet, the irony is that these are very much the things that we need to do, but we put on the back burner. We've had this experience, now I work in the Silicon Valley. A lot of my clients were, people who worked in the IT and holding very good positions. So, people would come in with a complaint. The chief complaint would be that they have difficulty in their relationship with their wife or their husband, but more often with it was with the wife, because men identify more with work. So then as the therapy would progress, they wanted to know how to be more productive and how to get the next promotion. So the therapist would say to them, but your identified complaint was that, you're not getting along with your wife. But that's not what they wanted to work on. They wanted to work on the next promotion. So that's the irony, that there is something that is causing them pain, but their emphasis is something entirely different. And you can imagine the amount of resistance that creates internally. Then the next thing is that, we are constantly have our focus on the promotion or the deadline or getting funding. And in that process, we become so outcome oriented that we forget to, relish this and celebrate the ongoing goals and the process and small achievements that we might have every day. Maybe one little piece goes right. Maybe it's not a huge thing, but at least that we got right. So if we can enjoy that and celebrate that and pause a little bit, relish that, savor that achievement or the joy of whether it's a good interaction or whether it's a good piece of coding that you've done, whatever it might be. So just enjoying those small things, even if they seem very, very light, someone coined the word saying that, even if it's something that just titillates you, sort of, it's not big enough to necessarily make a big change, but at least, you've got a good feeling, just a little spark of joy, and holding on to that a little bit. And then, of course, we've all heard about the attitude of gratitude, kind of keeping our focus on that and being able to appreciate things that are going right. There is a tendency always to focus on that which is not going well at work or in our life. And uh, it makes us feel negative. It causes us to talk about all the problems that other people have. And the management's not doing well, and this and that. So kind of turning things around and looking at it from the things that are working well, the blessings that we do have, and starting your day and ending your day with that. It's once again, as I said, you've heard this probably a million times, but there's probably no better mantra for feeling good in your life other than having an attitude of gratitude. Then mindfulness, once again, Gauravji can also talk about that, kind of staying in the present moment. One time, one spiritual guru was asked, it was a big sabha, and one of the members asked the Guruji that, my job is so mundane and so routine, I can't afford to leave it, but I don't know what to do. How can I get through my day? And his response was that in face of some kind of a routine, mundane kind of a job, what allows you to feel more positive and not too stressed about it is if you can stay in the present moment. So in the present moment, any chore can feel okay, can feel fine, even if it's doing the dishes, even if it is doing the laundry. Whenever you do these, what you might consider frivolous or silly or routine or mundane tasks, when you do them mindfully, that there is less frustration and a greater sense of flow and prana. Okay. And then, of course, if the stress gets to a level that you really can't find your way out of it, then getting someone to mentor you, connecting with a coach, or seeking help from a counselor. People have this idea amongst our Indian diaspora that therapy and counseling is for the broken, and to not necessarily look at it that way, but kind of seek it out as a way of finding some tools, or at least being able to look at the situation from a different perspective, get some objective, because our friends and family are not objective. We give them our point of view, and because they want to align with us, they're loyal to us, they want to align with us, they usually will sort of echo our own perspective. But when you go and seek someone objective, they may be able to show you a different way of looking at things. And they're not going to do that in the first session, because they too, like your family members, might not want to say something to hurt you. But once you form the relationship, the alliance, they'll be able to show you that, there is a different way of looking at the situation. So those are some of the ways, and of course there could be many others, like having a hobby, playing the guitar, singing, doing activities like gardening, where there is a sense of joy and flow, and using those to break up a more demanding task in life. And you may have your very own. I mean, everybody has their own things to do. But the interesting thing is that we have to keep in mind what they are. So it's a good idea, and my recommendation to everyone, to make a list of what those activities are for you. Maybe there are 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 small things that you can do when you're feeling stressed, and to make a list of it and write it down. Because what happens is we forget. We know that we can, step out into the garden and maybe trim some plant, and that make us feel good. But we don't do it because we've got this work, we've got this deadline, and I shouldn't be doing gardening at such a time, right? So I was talking to Gauravji just yesterday and giving this example that when I used to drive my children to school, and it was a half an hour drive up and down, and while driving them to school, they would have some, and of course it was stressful because it was in traffic, and I'm carpooling, so I have 4 or 5 children with me, and they're talking and they're listening to some loud music, which I didn't enjoy, and negotiating traffic with all of that and trying to get there in time. So this is stressful kind of a situation. And when I would be driving back, I didn't have the same pressure of being on time. But I would just forget that now I have the opportunity to change the channel and listen to some music that I actually enjoy. Because while going, we'd be listening to some music that was certainly not my genre of music, and then while coming back, the station continued to play, and I would forget to switch. So just being more mindful and saying that perhaps we can switch the channel, whether it's the radio station or whether it's the routine of our life, that we can switch the channel and thereby sort of nourish and nurture us. So that can be a stress reliever. And I'll stop there, and I think Gauravji, you're next.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Punitji. Just building on what you just said, Punitji, I wanted to sort of add a few more things as a sort of professional who's also a yogi. There's a few things I noticed. I gave a series of talks on this during the famous COVID era. There are a few things that people can do in addition to cope with their workplace stress. The first thing, I'm going to look at point 5 here in the middle of the chart. There are 4 points I'm going to make right now. The first is if you have a calendar or a schedule that's just one intense meeting after another, you will completely attune to running. But then without rest, then you will not be able to run too far. And that's, I think, the core problem. Inserting periods of rest, including what Punitji was talking about, sleep is rest, and it's really important for recharging. It's the same in your work schedule as well. Try to put in deliberate breaks. If you're going to have lunch, just go outside, sit in the sun, or just talk to friends, or do something more that gives you a break from the day that you have. Buffer yourself. In fact, one of the meditations I'd created, several meditations I've created, were designed to buffer the workday, coffee break, lunch break, post-lunch break, coming home from work, because those are the places you're going to insert a break and completely recharge yourself. So that's the first thing. The second thing, number 6 over here, is outrage hacking. What's been happening, and this was a part of the subject of the book that I wrote, is that machines are getting really powerful at engaging us emotionally. That's how they get paid, because the more emotionally engaged you are, the more ads you're going to see. So essentially, in our mind, imagine it's like a freeway. You put billboards over here, and they want to put as many billboards, so they want you to drive slow in your mind. How they achieve that is by outraging the heck out of you. And so what happens, Punitji and I were discussing, it's like sitting at the airport and having one of those 24-hour news channels, and it almost always feels like, you probably shouldn't board a flight, frankly, because the world outside is completely collapsing as you watch. So there's a lot of outrage hacking that's going on in social media as well as on the news. Don't watch the news every minute or obsessively. They're going to repeat with a sort of urgency in their voice, which is going to induce a sort of closing of the heart. You're going to feel distressed about it. There's no reason for that. And so don't be outrage hacked, because understand it's not that the world is collapsing. It's that the media is designed. The rules of commerce of this media and the internet are that your engagement is what they get paid for, and your loving engagement is not as exciting as your outrage, what's called doom scrolling or hate surfing or whatever. Essentially, the angrier you are, the more fearful you are, the more you're going to surf, and that's what they want. Don't let that happen to you. The next thing I'm going to say is, this is my joke from my engineering college days, that people that we were outnumbered, human to monkey. We had a lot of these rhesus monkeys sitting there. So now, part of my engineering, I had the good fortune of observing very closely the monkeys. It turns out the monkeys are amazing social species. They spend 35 to 45% of their time. I didn't compute this. This is from an internet study, but they spend a lot of their time grooming each other, and their brains are designed to compute and keep track and so on. We're the same. We're the same. Our brains are even bigger, more computational energy to spend on human connection. The problem with the way our work is right now, we're not connecting with people. And that creates a very harsh landscape. Sitting at home, doing just your work from home, or doing these calls where you're not getting to see or connect or feel the presence of people, their vibrations. That's terrible. It takes a toll. And go out there, see people, go sit at a coffee shop if you must, go commute or go to a festival, connect with people, because we're designed as a species to be a connecting species. Without that, life is very harsh and you won't be recharging. Next is this whole thing about not being able to make decisions. Train your mind. You can untrain your mind from distraction. Invest in beauty, invest in music. Just the way Punit ji was saying, change the channel on your radio. Go to something that you appreciate. Appreciate art. Learn to build taste, because that taste, rasa, is what you've been missing in the work, which is causing stress. Beauty. One of my other maxims that I've built for myself is really, rules are always way better than willpower, which is to say, don't spend your decision making energy on stupid decisions like whether you're going to have flat white or cappuccino. I mean, if you're going to obsess on which coffee you're going to have, maybe, if you can make 3 decisions in your day, is this where you're spending your decision making energy? Maybe not. Another one, my favorite, I'm of course a yogi, and so sattvic thing comes in handy. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I'm vegetarian, I've always been this way. And that saves me a bunch of time and energy in declining my friends. If I go to a party and they're like, Gaurav, you should drink, what will make you drink? Well, I just don't drink, period. And so energy is saved. I never have to waste any energy thinking about that question. That saves a bunch of energy and decision-making capability for things that truly matter. So find those rules that you can help save your energy. Punitji and I were talking, coming back to this outrage hacking thing, as I'm just reminded, you want to be, Punitji, maybe you can pitch in, but you want to be a concerned citizen. You don't want to be a Luddite sitting inside your cave, not worrying about the world. Sure, watch the news once a day, keep track of what's going on in the world or the stock market or whatever, but know the limits of your control and don't let that repeating ticker telling you there's a problem, don't let that get to you. And it's not the same thing. You can be concerned about people, but if, for example, there's a war going on in Europe, you're concerned about it, sure. But do you know either of the Vladimir folks personally? You don't. Can you impact the war? No. You can vote. You should vote when it's time to vote. But other than that, forget about it, right? It's out of your control. Why obsess over it? So those are some things I wanted to say from a yogic point of view. I know we need to talk about burnout. So why don't we just talk about a little, Puniti, from your point of view on burnout? And I have a couple of more things to add on burnout as well.
Yeah, I'm aware that we are we've got a little time now, so I'm going to try to rush through this. But here, when I was talking about burnout, of course, a lot of things that we do to manage stress will also apply to managing burnout. But I've wanted to add a few factors which are more of our attitudinal belief, thought process factors that come into play, especially in the Bay Area, what I have encountered, especially with the young, entrepreneurs and professionals. One of them is, is unrealistic expectations from themselves, from their work, and from the timeline, wanting to achieve too much too soon, whether or not it's something they value, or whether or not they have that intrinsic interest and ability, right? Because everyone is different. Not everyone is going to become, I mean, it's good to have hope and ambition, but be more realistic about it. So a lot of unrealistic expectations amongst the young to make it to a certain level very fast, and a sense of entitlement, which the last two generations have experienced, the millennials and I believe the Gen X's, or I don't know which gen it is at this time, but that's been sort of gradually increasing incrementally. So kind of taking a look at it, and I think the attitude of gratitude helps with that. And there's a tendency to ignore individual differences but want the same achievement, same outcome. Difficulty to rejoice in another's success because the own competitiveness of why didn't I get it, why can't I achieve it, comes in. So kind of trying to connect and look at the whole picture and being able to enjoy the success of a friend or a colleague, and not let bitterness and resentment and competitiveness come into too much of a play, right? And of course, seeking help. Some of the factors that can reduce the risk of burnout is when we are not too enmeshed with the outcome, because when we absolutely want things to go a certain way, work to go a certain way, life to go a certain way. These days, some of the high achievers, from great schools, they have this timeline, and whenever there is a detour, they are extremely upset. Oh, I thought by 30 I would do this. Oh, I thought by 40 I would do this, or I needed to have gotten this far by this age, and something detour will happen, whether it's an illness or a breakup or a family issue that causes them to sort of feel extremely stressed because their timeline has shifted. And then, of course, as we said, enjoying the process, the daily achievements, taking time for oneself, and taking time for relationships. One of the things that I've noticed is that people who are, two people who are doing the same job at same level, if one person goes home and engages with the family and is open to doing some frivolous activity, despite the fact that the person is a CEO of a company, whether it's taking the garbage out or whether it's planting something, that their general level of well-being is going to be a whole lot better than another person who feels, oh, I'm the CEO, so I shouldn't have to do these things. Go, get someone to do it, or, let somebody else do it because, I'm too busy to attend to these. So I don't know whether it's the personality which brings about these changes, which is responsible. I mean, I don't know exactly what is the cause. Is it a causal factor or a correlational factor? But certainly being able to do those non-important tasks at home, which in turn allow relationships to flow better at home, is going to be a factor that will reduce the risk for stress and burnout at work, right? And lastly, of course, we've talked about again, is that when our own personal goals are in one direction, but we are walking in another direction. Very often I hear people saying that they want to achieve certain thing or do a certain thing, and the road leading to that certain achievement, say if it's road A, but their daily life, the activities of their daily life, the things that they're doing day to day seem to follow road B. So it's really hard to achieve some end point from road A when you're actually following road B. So trying to make that connect between your daily activity and your personal value and the goals you want to make. A favorite singer of mine died last year. You all may not have heard of her. Her name is Naira Noor, but she's a Pakistani ghazal singer, and I happened to be listening to her interview just today. And she's, apart from being a famous ghazal singer, a very religious person. And one of the things she said, that happiness, that she has reached this conclusion that happiness or joy or peace, a very simple way to sort of see whether it exists or whether you can achieve it or not, is when your inside and outside are one. When you don't have an enormous discrepancy between what you are inside, what you value inside of you, and what you're doing outside, activities in the world. So, and I'm going to just say one more thing and then hand it over to Gaurav ji, is that, when it comes to burnout, especially when we are looking at caregiver burnout, of course, even at works, when there are deadlines and such, but when we're looking at caregiver burnout, is that people have an enormous sense of guilt. They feel that if they're taking care of a person, of an elderly parent or a spouse who's very unwell, they feel that they are not entitled to taking time for themselves to do something fun or something enjoyable because they have to take care of the spouse or the parent. And what I have noticed invariably is that when they don't take that time for themselves, that they are grouchy and irritable with their spouses or their parents, and they get angry easily at the parent, so or the spouse. So it actually not taking time for themselves, not allowing a little outing here and there because they feel they are such a devoted husband or wife, actually backfires, because it's not nourishing them and they're not able to sort of then move forward and nurture the other person. So keeping that in mind, that not only is it perfectly fine to take time for yourself, it is absolutely essential, because you will never be able to be patient and caring enough if you don't. You'll just get irritated with the other. So I'm going to hand it over to Gaurav ji.
Thank you, Punit ji. I've decided that I will not burn out on account of paucity of time, because this is a recorded session. We will roll until we're done. So, all right. Now I want to pull back on managing burnout as a professional who's a yogi. There's a bunch of thoughts that I had, and they conveniently match back to what Christina Maslach's 6 items were. So one was workload. Next is control, reward, community, fairness, and values. And I thought of these as sort of a yogic way of responding. So I have a much longer talk and sort of workshop that I run. But I'll give you the quick highlights. Hit me up if you want to hear the rest of it. There are 6. I propose a 6-part model for handling burnout, for managing burnout. And those all relate to things that are possible. They're not religious activities, but these are informed by Hindu philosophy, as you will see shortly. The first is this sense that I'm no good. One of the symptoms was this ineffectiveness and this sense of, I can't get things done. And a lot of that is simply that we have run out of trust in our own selves, and our Swadharma no longer matches what we're doing. Our internal compass is pointing one way and the work is pointing another way. And here, there are ways you can rewire your belief in yourself. You can remember your own story. In the Ramayana, there's a very interesting and very telling stage in the story where Hanumanji has been tasked to, needs to be tasked to go to Lanka and look up if Sitaji is there. And he thinks he's just a Vanar, not necessarily a divine being. And he is reminded by Jamwant of his story that he actually has yogic powers. He can fly, he can become larger in size, smaller in size, all of those things. But he has to be reminded of his own capabilities, because he is very self-deprecating before that. But he is reminded, and that helps him think about himself differently and then act the way he does. So there are ways to rewire your belief system and your self-belief. Go back at your own history. You're not a failure. You've done wonderful things in the past. Go back and look at them. Tell your own story again until you believe it. And then find purpose in what you're doing, even if it's not a thing you want to do. Why are you doing it? There must be a reason. Find the higher purpose, which is in fact Arjun's lament, right? He doesn't find it purposeful to act in the war, and that's why the entire Bhagavad Gita is played out. So find your purpose. So the first thing is find ways to rewire your belief and self-belief. Very important, because otherwise your energy will not flow and no amount of any other thing will help, because the source of your energy is not coming in. The second part, on speaking of energy, is learn to center, learn to be distraction free, learn to be contained in your own self. And this is very important for all the reasons we just talked about. And so go exercise, go do yoga, go learn to meditate, learn to keep your attention with you and not to be distracted or swayed away or blown away by the winds. Next is win every day. So this direction momentum is very important. When a lot of times when we're doing, my own experiences, when I'm doing things that have long-term cycles, right? I don't know if I'm actually making any progress. I will feel disheartened. And there's a lot of historical reference for this. People who are involved in long pursuits often feel disheartened because they don't know if anything's working. They don't even know if they're going in the right direction or what the heck is going on. The important thing here is to find ways to make everyday experiences learning and challenging, because that allows you to get to a state of flow. Again, not enough time today to talk about it. And finding joy in excellence. Yoga Karma Sukhachalam. You heard me say that in the Karma Yoga class. Finding joy in excellence. Did I do a good job of this thing itself? That should give me the payoff rather than the ultimate achievement of the thing, which might be months, years, or decades away, right? So learn to win every day because then it'll give you a sense of direction that you're moving, something's happening. Now let's turn our attention to joy. My claim as a yogi is that all of this rasa, lack of joy, is coming from the heart center. So what ways might we have of working from the heart? Well, funny you asked that question of a yogi. We have a lot of ways of opening the heart, right? Learning to surrender. We are not carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. We're not Atlas carrying out the whole planet, right? It's all good. Learn to surrender to the will of the universe, God, or whatever you might call the higher being. Engage in dancing or humming or chanting or praying. These are all amazing ways to open the heart. And heart is where the energy and joy will flow. And it's critical because otherwise, one of the two symptoms is what? Cynicism, depersonalization. That's all a closing of the heart, which we're trying to fix. Next is this community thing where you want support from people. You want to feel connected. And people usually think of it as, hey, nobody else is doing something for me. I say, well, you're banking with the wrong bank. Now, if you're not Indian or Hindi speaking, this may not appear as a good pun, but trust me, it's a good pun. There's a bank in India called Dena Bank, which is Dena also means to give. And so there's a giving bank. And then there's the other word, which is Lena, which is to take. There's a taking bank. It doesn't exist, but think of a hypothetical bank. If you're only banking with the taking bank, well, ain't no surprise you're not getting anything from that, right? But you can bank with the giving bank. You can work as a volunteer, feed the social flywheel by doing things for other people. It turns out you still feel the same sense of connection if someone was doing things for you or if you're doing something for them. Doesn't make any difference. So why not give? And then you realize, look, I'm doing things for other people. Other people have it worse than I am. I think it's all right. I have done something. My heart has opened. And now, even if I need something, I will ask with authority because I do so much the least the universe can do is respond to my request, right? So when you ask, you're not asking tentatively, shyly, I'm sorry to bother you, what would you do? No, you're going to ask with authority and expect to get positive results, even if you don't get it. The point is, give first. Bank with Dena Bank. Do not go to imitators that sound like Dena Bank, but actually the taking bank. Just change your bank. The final thing, this is the Karma Yoga topic, of course, you've already heard me talk about it. Go beyond hope. A lot of the expectations that we have, oh, if I do this, this will happen. And if it doesn't happen, then you're crestfallen, your self-respect and your energy levels, everything crashes. Go beyond hope. How do you go beyond hope? We talked about this in the Karma Yoga class. This is Asha Pash. The web of hope is holding us back. Instead, if you just do things because it's your nature and because you enjoy being excellent at the things that you do, that's why you're doing it. Now, the results come, don't come, doesn't matter to you. Your payoff is already from the satisfaction you got from doing it. And if the results come, great. Getting out of this web of hope allows you to regain control of your, regain agency over your own situation. You're no longer concerned about the payoff or whether you'll get money or recognition. It doesn't matter. You're doing what you're doing, and then whatever comes, it comes. It's a bonus. And these are things that, from a yoga point of view, I'd recommend to anyone. And each of these, again, I went through it really quickly, but these link back to what Christina Maslach talked about, those 6 things. But these are all things that anyone and everyone should try at their workplace. So with that, Punitji, any final words before we get into the close?
No, Gauravji, I think we've covered a lot. And when we have a discussion, we can, discuss some of the other concerns that people bring up.
Wonderful. Any questions or comments on this particular recording that people have? For those watching later, we're recording with a live audience. So if there are questions or comments, we would appreciate that. Otherwise, Pradnyaji, I turn it back to you and we will do the closing.
Yeah. I have just one question, Gauravji.
Sure.
How can meditation help in bringing ourselves into centering? Yeah, that is my question.
So the objective of meditation is to one, disentangle from the web of thought, these racing thoughts, and to disengage from thoughts and disidentify with our thoughts. We are not our thoughts, right? But you can't tell that. We seem to be, the contents of our consciousness seem to be our sense of self. I'm angry, I'm this, I'm that, or I'm unhappy, right? What meditation does, a good meditation practice does, is allows you to step back from that and see the contents of your thought and say, okay, let them come and go like clouds in the sky, and you can separate yourself. Now, when you're in an extreme state of distress, it is very difficult to meditate, and therefore you have to build a practice beforehand of centering. And if you remember, going back to the Gita, in the middle of the battlefield, Krishna tells him, Arjun, that you should meditate, and he says, "Chanchala hi mana Krishna." Right? The mind is fickle. Because it's pacing with negative thoughts. That's not a great time to pick up the practice. You have to have a centering practice that precedes this and continues into it. Because you're trying to return to a memory of a state where you're separate from the contents of your consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
How to meditate and techniques, there are several. I teach some of them. But again, do it before you need it. Because when you need it is not a great time to because then your mind is so occupied that meditation will not happen. You're just going to have more distress.
I wanted to add another thought to that, Gauravji. When we were talking about internal and external stressors, so one of the ways why the external stressor becomes an internal stressor is we have this thought process that sort of mediate and convert this external stress to our internal stress. And meditation breaks that cycle of vicious thinking. A practice of meditation, once we've been doing it for a little while, So it breaks that cycle and also allows us to let go. There are only two things in the entire universe that can allow us to let go of uh, sort of being uh, really caught up in our anxious thoughts or our depressive thoughts. One is, which I'm not recommending, but because I used to say it in my to my clients, I'm going to say it now. One of them is medication, and then the other one is meditation. So I certainly would say that select the second one before you go to the first. Yeah.
This reminds me, Punitji and Pradnaji, this reminds me of my favorite visual of this racing thoughts. I call it my Turkish friends. They're actually Turkey friends, and this is my favorite video. I play it all the time because I enjoy watching these guys. Now, turkeys are a very special kind of bird species that native to North America for people are in other countries. And they're not stupid, but they like to follow their leader. But they're not natural leaders, so it turns out that they're following the turkey in front. Now, if you remember, in Hindi there's a saying, right? Titar ke aage ek titar, titar ke aage ek piche. Similar to that, turkey has one turkey in front, one turkey behind. They don't necessarily know who the leader, but the turkey ahead must be a leader, they assume. And what happens is sometimes the situation sets into place where the turkeys have each found a leader, and that leader is the turkey in front of them. And so this happens. And so what's happening is, of course, these turkeys are following each other around. And that's similar to how I feel that our thoughts are racing. They're not actually going anywhere. It's the same thought, chasing another thought, chasing the same thought back again. And they're just racing, right? So what meditation does, a mantra practice can do that very easily, is it breaks that cycle. It clogs the traffic in the mind, and you have to stop and stare at these turkeys. And the turkeys think, okay, what are we doing? Nothing. All right, let's move on. And that's what you're trying to do with meditation, is break these turkeys from going around each other. Christine ji, you had a question or comment? No question or comment. All right. Any other question and comment on the call about turkeys or burnout or job satisfaction? Wonderful.
Looks like there is no any other comment. And that was such a wonderful lecture. I guess everyone, I'm going to listen it again so that I'll get few more points which I might have missed during the lecture. So, but thank you, Gauravji, Punitji, and Kailashji for the wonderful lecture. Yeah, thank you. And Gauravji, I would request you to lead the closing prayer. Thank you.
We'll do the closing prayer, which is Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, Sarve Santu Niramaya. So please sit comfortably. Any posture is fine. Sitting with the back straight. The back is straight but not stiff. And you're sitting. One second. I'm going to mute everyone. One second. Let me just mute all. Okay. You're sitting comfortably with your back straight. The back is straight but not stiff. The back, neck, and head are in a straight line. Now close your eyes gently and let the tongue fall to the bottom of the mouth. Relax the expression on your face and bring a gentle quarter moon smile to your face. Relax your shoulders, and as you breathe in, let the smile travel all the way down into the heart, and through your heart, let it radiate out into the world, a gentle, smiling world, smiling back at us. Bring the palms together in Namaskar Mudra. We're going to chant Om once and then the closing prayers. Exhale completely. Take a deep breath. Inhale. Inhale and chant. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayah, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Take your arms behind you, grab your right wrist with the left hand, and breathing in, stretch. Breathing out, bend forward in a deep sense of surrender. Come back up, breathing in, release your hands, rub your palms together to generate some heat, and gently cup your eyeballs to transfer that heat. Now, blinking, open your eyes and pull your palms back. I can open back. Namaskar. Thank you very much, and see you at the discussion session. Namaskar. Thank you,
Namaskar.
Punit.
Thank you.
Namaskar.
Namaste.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.